This video is sponsored by Full Reptile Collective, brought to you by Dan Hardy. Head over to their website at fullreptile.co.uk where you can find anything from training gear, t-shirts, hoodies, all the way to coffee. For an exclusive 10% off, use Dan Said So at checkout. Make sure to also check out their YouTube channel for some of the best MMA content out there, bar my own. Let's get back to the video. Alright, so this is MMA Show 26 with Mike Owens. This is a real treat for me because I've been chatting to you for a while and finally actually get to have a sit down because you are everywhere on my social feed anyway with the interviews. You managed to get everyone, which is great. I saw for the first time Shane Burgos saying he was leaving, talking to you, for example, going to the PFL, which the UFC have already said they made a massive mistake with, which I'm glad to see because he should have been there. But want to start everything with what happened last week with, in my opinion, the greatest UK MMA scene of all time in Leon. Not only winning against the champion, but he's beat the pound for pound one. Yeah. Arguable.
Yes.
And he didn't just beat him as well. He knocked him clean out to the point where no one expected that, especially in 1 minute to go in a fight he was losing. But what was the scene like in your household when that happened?
Well, to be honest, as we talked about off camera, I was covering the PFL. So when I got home about 5:30 in the morning after driving home from London to Liverpool, the main event was just about kicking off, and I was too tired to watch it, to be quite honest. So I caught it up with it the next morning, and I think one thing that is so important with this kind of storyline is the context. You have got to contextualize the last minute. You've got to contextualize the road Leon's been on, and as you mentioned, not fighting a champion, fighting the most dominant fighter in the sport at the moment. And I think a lot of people, anyone who pick Leon by decision, pick Leon 3 rounds to 2, maybe even a split. I saw very, very few people picking Leon to finish Usman because 3 days ago, the thought of Usman being knocked out cold was difficult to imagine. It's one of those fights. Yeah, it's one of those fights where you've really got to add the context in, and to kind of get the grandiose of the occasion, if you like.
And now all of a sudden, a lot of people are fancying him in the rematch because in the interview after, he said it was him at his worst. He knows he didn't fight a good fight. I think a lot of that had to do with fighting at altitude. I know he got there a couple of weeks early to prepare for it, but everyone seemed to get tired. It seemed, you look at the Luke Rockhold fight, that was a very strange thing of hands on the knees every 2 minutes trying to catch his breath. And Luke's not that bad at cardio. He's always slowed in the third rounds in the past, but it was just a complete, wonder fight for me. And I stand by. I think he'd do really well defending the belt, whether it be against Usman or... I don't think Usman's going to have to fight anybody else to get a rematch, obviously. But I don't think they're going to rematch Usman immediately. I think they'll do it with Jorge because there's a narrative there and it will sell in the UK. And what do you reckon about that?
To be honest, first and foremost for me, it's when Usman can get medically cleared. Yeah. Like what I think will likely happen is there'll be a title defense in between a potential trilogy because Usman's going to need some time off, and that's where the fight in 3 weeks between Chimaev and Diaz is so interesting because they want Chimaev as the champion, no doubt in my mind. Yeah. He's everything they want in a poster boy, and they've got a golden opportunity here against someone who I would consider having a decent style matchup. Chimaev being a very good style matchup when fighting Leon, for Chimaev type of thing.
Yeah.
And he's already seen very much certain holes that I presume they think him and his team think they could exploit in terms of what Usman was able to do to Edwards. So I get what you're saying about the Jorge fight, but I wonder if Jorge's popularity is really waned to a point where they're going to make that fight, and I think they may go Chimaev if he, as we all assume, does what we think he'll do to Nate Diaz.
What do you think of that fight in particular, the Nate versus Khamzat fight? Because it's that hurts me a little bit as someone that's a massive fan of the Diaz brothers and what they've done for the sport. Seeing him almost, on paper it's an execution, but I don't. He can shock the world. This is MMA; anything can happen. But what was your initial reaction when you see Diaz's match with Chimaev?
Well, first and foremost, from like an ethics aspect, and ethics is the wrong word to use in MMA. It's cage fighting when all said and done. But for a guy who we know the context. Nate's going to leave and try and secure the biggest payday that he can with his, star power. For them to match him against the most difficult style matchup, other than probably somebody at middleweight, which, let's not forget, Hamza fights a middleweight, but someone who is a natural middleweight. It's callous beyond belief. It really, really is. And we can romanticize Nate Diaz all. He's a very much a fighter you can romanticize in terms of the moments that he's had. Even you think about his last fight, people don't remember the 24 minutes of Edwards outclassing him. They remember one straight left. So let's be honest, MMA is a surprising sport. It's also a lot of the time not that surprising, and I don't think it's going to be one of those where you wake up on the Sunday morning or you stay up and it's going to be a surprise. I think Khamzat's the real deal, and I think if we took star power out of it, a lot of fans would have a much different opinion on how this fight would go. If you just looked at those two athletes in terms of what they're doing, where they're currently at in their careers, I think the romanticism of the Diaz upset mightn't be as strong.
I agree with you. I mean, I think personally Chamar's just going to run through him very quickly. And that's sad to think, but because the UFC, they signed off on this fight, which shows how much they want Hamza at the top, doesn't it? So, but yeah, so getting to what you were at the weekend then, when you got back late driving, you saw your best mate, Brendan Loughnane, absolutely put on a clinic, in my opinion. Those calf kicks was second to none. They were some of the best striking performance, dodging high kicks, body kicks. He was shelling up so well, taking very little damage, and really, I think, did he go in as an underdog as well against Chris Wade?
He said in the cage he was the 3-1 underdog. I checked the morning off. He was about 2.5 to 1. You could get him as high as about plus 250, 260.
So it just shows how valued Chris Wade is and what people think of him and how highly respected he is. And to beat him in the manner he did, and now he's again against one of your other friends, is going to be in Bubba. That's all the interviews. What do you make of that matchup for both guys in this one?
It's very much one of those fights where wherever it's taking place, I'll know who's winning. Like if I was watching it as a silhouette, I would likely have a very good idea of who's winning. And what I mean by that is, if it's someone on top position for large parts, I think Jenkins has got it. If it's on the feet for large part, I think Brendan will really confuse Jenkins. Jenkins is very much a simple striker in many ways. He's got a little bit of early Usman to him in a way. Jenkins, in the sense of he doesn't really throw nothing too crazy. It's just the very simple strikes, but with a lot of power and to obviously set up the takedowns. But it's a close fight. It's difficult. I like both guys, but I obviously like one guy a little bit more than the other. So it's difficult for me to comment, in terms of a real breakdown. But it's a bit of a funny one because when the PFL came back for the 2021 season, that was kind of the fight everybody was talking about. I remember being on the initial media call, and Brendan got asked a couple of times, what do you think about facing Bubba? And Bubba got asked a couple of times, what do you think about facing Brendan? And it felt like they were on this collision course, and everyone expected them to get to the final last year. And yet they both get to the semis, and, it's kind of not a heartbreaking moment, but a little bit of a surprise that neither of them got to the final. And now they're both there, and it feels like this, not a massive collision course, but a collision course nonetheless. So it's going to be a massive fight. Probably, it could be argued one of the most competitive finals in this PFL tournament.
I think so. From recent memory as well about PFL finals, they're not competitive. There's normally one standout, and another standout obviously is your other friend Kayla, who destroyed opposition yet again. What do you think she should actually do with her career at this point? Because she's been very outspoken in how she wants to fight Amanda or Chris Cyborg, especially Chris. But do you think she should just keep doing what she's doing? Just stay in the PFL, earn the money, get that record up? Why go over? Why try and get that name? Or do you think to cement a legacy, you kind of need one of those big names from another organization?
Personally, I think at the top, I think any athlete has got, or any fighter has got about 3 consecutive PFL seasons in them. I think the schedule is so intense, 4 fights in 6 months and all of that. And you've got to have a certain element. But let's not forget, Kayla's finished a lot of fights early. She's also had a lot of luck in the sense of She hasn't just sustained any major injuries. She hasn't had to withdraw in the way that a lot of fighters have. You know, she's training all year round. It could easily blow a knee out in training. So she's been very lucky in that sense. But I think every fighter's got about 3 in them before it would take its toll. And I think obviously Kayla's coming to her end of the 3rd now. So she told me when I spoke to her on Saturday on when I interviewed her that she's obviously got the final fight in November, and she's got one final fight where PFL are going to trial PFL pay-per-view, and the ultimate hope is to get Chris Cyborg over and have Cyborg versus Harrison at PFL pay-per-view. At that point, I think it would obviously, there was a clause in her contract saying she had to basically stay this year if the PFL matched anyone else's offers. There's no clause after this year. So once she fights out the 2-fight deal, it's the ball's in Kayla's court. And if I know Kayla, and I know the competitor Kayla is, the last thing Kayla would want to do is finish a career and there be anyone's name, and any fan could go, yes, but you never fought X, or you never fought Y, or you never fought X when they were still on top of the game. You know, she could fight Nunes in 2 years' time. She steamrolls Nunes the way she's steamrolling everybody else. And the narrative is, well, you fought her when she's past the prime. Kayla doesn't like the sound of that. So from the impression that I got from Kayla on Saturday night, she loves the PFL. She's grateful for the PFL. She wants out of the PFL. And that's what's going to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, they're not favourable matchups, in my opinion, for someone like Cyborg. She doesn't do well against someone that just is so heavy based in one element that she's not the strongest. She's not weak in it, but Aline Blanco held her down. I mean, what Kayla Harrison can do it's a different story. So, no, that'd be really interesting to see. And I can't wait to see the finals, to be honest. I fully expect Kayla to win. I mean, I think everyone does, the bookies, the fans, everyone, which is why it'd be such an upset if she didn't. But Brendan Bubba that's an excellent fight, really competitive fight. And I'm looking forward to hearing a few people's breakdowns on that.
100%.
Yeah. So this week is there's some really good fights on this card. This is UFC Paris.
The week after next.
Is it the week after next? Yes. So yeah, UFC Paris. So this is it's an excellent card for one fight for me that got shoved in 2 weeks ago now, which is Charles Jourdan versus Nathaniel Wood. Have you seen that? So obviously big fans of Nathaniel Wood here. No, you are as well. Charles Jourdan coming off that incredibly competitive fight with Shane Burgos, and Shane himself said he wasn't at his best. He felt like not ashamed. That's a strong word, but upset with his performance, I think is fair. He knows he could have done better. He had a great first round, and then Charles kind of laid into him in the last, and that's not how he wanted to finish it. Nathaniel Wood never looked better to me at 145 in London. Like he said he outgrew 135. It killed him to make that weight the first time, obviously, when the pullout happened, and he did that famous, picture of him with all the veins, everything. It looked tough. It looked seriously hard for him. Against someone like Jourdan, who might be shooting himself in the foot here he's had some excellent fights, but is he of this caliber? Is he that top 10 guy that Burgos definitely is? He couldn't break in. So now he's fighting an unranked guy. I feel this is a major opportunity for Nathaniel Wood to leapfrog some people here. Get into, he's had a couple years off before he had the fight against Charles Rosa. Get into that top 10 with a win over Charles Jourdan here. Because at the moment, even though he lost to Burgos, I think his stock is extremely high. What do you think of Nathaniel Wood's chances against Jourdan?
Well, I think one thing that's on Nathaniel's side is I feel like because of all the news about Burgos moving to the PFL, and because I think that the fight against Jourdan Burgos is relatively recent, only about 6-7 weeks ago. People can still remember there was a lot of controversy around that decision. A lot of people thought Jourdan deserved the nod, and that's still people can still remember that. That's still pretty relevant. So Charles Jourdan is almost an unofficial top 15er in a lot of people's minds. He beat the top 15. He should be in the top 15. So with that being said, it's an even bigger scalp for Nathaniel Wood up for grabs. Now, when Nathaniel made the move up to 145, my biggest worry for him was the size disadvantage, because he was never a particularly massive 135er. He was lean and he was jacked, but he wasn't tall and rangy in the way a Rob Font or a Corey Sandhagen might be.
Mm-hmm.
And my worry was, could you imagine someone like Shane Burgos in there when Nathaniel would? I mean, Shane Burgos would tower over Nathaniel would.
Yeah.
But Nathaniel talked about how, well, if he beats me on size, he beats me on size, but I should be able to outskill him. So I should be able to outskill these featherweights. Now, outskilling Charles Jourdan is going to be a difficult task. Like, Charles Jourdan is very, very technical. He's very smart. Obviously, there's going to be an advantage given Nathaniel is on a 1 hour flight. Jourdan's going to be on multiple hours, 5, 6, 7, something like that. But it feels a bit like a pick 'em. But if it weren't for the circumstance, I would probably lean towards Jourdan. But given the circumstance, given where it is, given the momentum each of them are riding, I think it's more closer. It's going to be closer. It's going to be a 29-28 either way, maybe even a split decision for me.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well. Momentum's massive here. Jourdan did take damage against Burgos. Definitely took damage. Got a chip on his shoulder about the decision, I'm sure. And Nathaniel whitewashed Charles Rosa. Didn't get touched, really. He just cleanly through, no damage. Now he wants to keep the ball rolling. And as you say, an hour away, he's going to have some fans over there. I feel like it could be, they're both mirror each other on the feet, in my opinion. I just think Charles Jourdan has that grittiness about him where he can just stand and swing if he needs to, as well as just pumping that jab out, keeping that distance and chopping you down. It's really interesting, but no, I'm glad it's a pick 'em for you, because I was hoping that just like, no, Charles Jourdan. Yeah. it's a head and heart moment for me where I know how dangerous Jourdan is, and but I've watched Nathaniel Wood since he was like 3-0, live, so you got a lot invested in these guys at this point.
Yeah, no, of course. Especially when you do what we do, you build up I don't know if you've ever spoke to Nathaniel, but the way I've spoken to him a few times, you do build up a relationship with them, and obviously to different extents, but Vettori, anyone I speak to, I want to win because you've given me your time. You've been generous with your time. Why wouldn't I? I'm not that I've got anything against Jourdan. He might be the nicest guy in the world. He probably is, but when you, as you say, when you invest some time and you have conversation with people, of course you want to see them do well. And I think Wood's been very unlucky in his UFC run in many ways. The 2 years out, took the tough loss against John Dodson, the very competitive loss, which people often overlook, against Casey Kenny. So
I had him winning that fight as well.
I thought it was pretty close, to be honest. I can remember thinking it was a very close fight. So he's one of those. He's difficult not to like, is what I'll say about Nathaniel Wood. You can't think of many people who wouldn't dislike him if you've ever interacted with him. So that's another thing too.
No, 100% agree. But there's one more fight, and then I'm going to let you go then, sir. It's a nice fight I've saved for you as well, instead of doing my own personal video on it, because I wanted to hear someone else's thoughts, because it's such a close. I think it's closer than people think, and that is Robert Whittaker against Marvin Vettori. Now, this fight is extremely interesting because first watch of Israel versus Robert, I'm not sure how you had it, but I had Israel pretty much whitewashing him other than one round. I had him cleanly outstriking him, taking no damage, playing it very safe, not taking any risk because he knew he was ahead. Nothing wrong with that approach at all. Second watch, I had it very, very close. I think Robert did a lot of good work. I thought he was, maybe overexerting in energy where he didn't need to be. And that's where I think Israel just took control. I think the size is a major factor with how long he is as an individual, but this fight is completely different. You've got someone that fights very similarly to Robert. I just think is less skillful on the feet, but the grinding aspect, the clinch control, the trips, he'll treat the fight as a sport almost than a fight. Marvin Vettori, he'll try and win a round. I call it like the Bilal Muhammad approach. As soon as the going gets tough, he'll probably back out. But if you want to just win around and lay on prey on someone, the John Fitch style, then it works very well. So name drop a few there. But how do you think Marvin Vettori can do against someone like Robert? Because Robert is clearly the number one contender. He's clearly the second best other than Israel in this division. I mean, you might have something different than that, but to me, he is anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was about to say that. I was about to make that point, yeah.
Yeah. So how would you think Marvin could approach this one, seeing as he's fallen twice against Israel now? And he's almost that nearly man. It's just that last hurdle he trips at.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is with any fighter, there's going to be a disgrace being, across the board, or widely viewed as the second best middleweight in the world. But that's a big honour that Robert Whittaker should hold and should be proud of. And Vettori's skill set highlight his limits. And what I mean by that is he's not the best martial artist in the world, but his strengths aren't necessarily in martial arts. They're in strength, they're in pace, they're in will. And part of me thinks that the 3-round fight favours Vettori, because I don't see this going to a finish. And the only way I would see this going to a finish would be a devastating finish and a moment of brilliance from Robert Whittaker, a la Leon Edwards on Saturday. Something of that ilk where it's just out of nowhere. So if you're Marvin Vettori, you've got to take 2 rounds from Whittaker as a basic task. And you can take 2 rounds in a lot of ways, by volume, by clinch work, by takedowns and trips, and just ground control on the feet will often win you around, despite how some people may judge you.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you mentioned, for Marvin Vettori, he's got to make this into a fight. And I think one thing that's so kind of promising about Vettori is his lack of ego. And what I mean by that is he fights like he's aware of his own limits. He doesn't. He will go into that fight knowing that Robert Whittaker is the better mixed martial artist. Is probably the more skilled athlete. Is probably the all round the better skilled individual, and that's a dangerous prospect when you've got someone who can really strip back their ego and go, "This guy's better than me. I've got to make this guy's style completely and utterly nullified." So, for me, it'll be a 29-28 either way. And I know I've said that a couple of times, so I realise I'm sitting on the fence. But I think
no, that's good.
It will be a fast start from one or the other. It will either be Whittaker will take the ascendancy with the striking, or Vettori will really start to bulldoze him and get him up against the clinch and work for takedowns. And it's whether the guy who takes the ascendancy can keep that ascendancy into the second round enough to win it. Because what I anticipate in this fight is a switch. I anticipate that whoever wins the first round loses the third round. The trouble is, I can't say definitively who's going to win the first round, and as a result, who's going to win the third round. So it's one of those fights where it's all about momentum. It's all about who can take the front foot, and that's where I see the big opening for Marvin Vettori. Can he keep Whittaker on the back foot long enough to steal 2 rounds?
Yeah, and frustrate him against I think we both see it the same way with Marvin with an underhook. Just pushed him against the cage, just kneeing his thighs and just grinding, getting that volume on the scorecards. Some judges like seeing volume, some like seeing it like a Thai fight, like just completely damaged. So all depends, doesn't it? But no, that's a really good take, actually. I like that. If Marvin Vettori does win, do you think he gets another title shot?
No, I don't think.
That's a tough one for him, then, isn't
it? Yeah, it is.
Robert Whittaker, and you can't get.
It's probably. I wonder if Vettori will enter that kind of, or maybe he already. Well, this is a co-main, so this doesn't really serve to my theory, but I wonder if he'll become one of those kind of fighters that just circulate on as main events, as kind of fight night main events.
Mm-hmm.
So they could easily still make the Darren Till fight, even though Till's maybe not in the position he once was. They could easily make a Sean Strickland versus Marvin Vettori is a great fight. Derek Brunson's right there, so I think he may be in a similar position to where Whittaker was after the first Adesanya loss. But he's going to need a kind of definitive win streak of I beat this guy, and this guy. Almost as I always say, almost defend the title for Adesanya and kind of knock down a few prospects. Obviously, Whittaker's not a prospect, but that similar ilk of I'm gonna beat 2 or 3 guys who were one win away from fighting the champ. I, by default, deserve a third go. But that's going to be a tough sell.
It is going to be a tough sell, but yeah, especially if that's a really good point. He might go back to how Robert Whittaker had to fight 3 times, win 3 times against top guys as well. Till, Brunson, Cannonier, whatever it was. It was all crazy, isn't it?
Till, Cannonier.
It was Cannonier and who else?
Gastelum.
That was Gastelum. That was it. Yeah. Everyone's got to win over Gastelum these days, haven't they?
Yeah, they're not as rare as they once were, which is a bit of a shame, to be honest, because you can't not like Kelvin Gastelum.
No, exactly. He's that tweener. Shouldn't be at middleweight. Shouldn't be at welterweight. He's just that extra division.
There's also a theory, and it's a bit of a harsh theory, but there is also a theory. If you look at Kelvin Gastelum's win streak, what is it? or wins one is his actual best win. You know, he had the split against Jacare. He had the knockout of Bisping when Bisping was compromised off the GSP loss.
Yeah, 10 days after, wasn't it, in Shanghai?
Yeah, there's almost a hipster theory that Kelvin Gastelum's best win is taking 2 rounds from Adesanya. And I can kind of, in a way, see where that's coming from, if you know what I mean. It's harsh, but it is kind of true.
Yeah. No, it is harsh, but it's true. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. Excellent. Have you got anything else going on that you want to tell people about or anything?
Not as of such as you alluded to, you can find my work now on LowkickMMA and also on Mike Owens Media. So I'm working across both. And yeah, just thank you for the time. Thank you for the invite. It would be great to do something again.
No, appreciate it, dude. Appreciate you coming on. Excellent. Cool. Nice one, man.